Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, August 4th, 2020. Time for another show. And, most people are talking this morning about the Axios interview. Jonathan Swan and Donald Trump. And it was horrible. And I haven't seen the whole thing. And we probably could just play the whole thing and, we'll get in trouble for copyright, I imagine. But yes, as a matter of fact, as one of the comments being traded in my own notifications column comes up. Look, it is what it is. The interview is what it is. Coronavirus is what it is. I've seen, I guess there are probably about 5 or 6 critical clips that are circulating this morning. By and large, everyone's talking about the argument that they have over whose charts go to 11. Which is amazing, and I thought a very good summation of the situation here. Arguing back and forth with Jonathan Swan. I guess they must have armed the president with charts, and I've been thinking about the numbers. I don't know. I guess it works out. I don't know. Maybe they fudged the numbers too. They left out certain I have no idea. But apparently, the president thinks we're doing great. Not a surprise, but thinks we're doing great with the pandemic. And with respect to death rate, he keeps referring to the fact that we're one of the best in the world, and we're one of the worst in the world. And it's hard to understand, other than just saying, well, he's a complete liar and that's just the way he works. It's hard to understand how he can stand there or sit there as he's doing in this. By the way, a lot of comments on how low the chairs were and how it looks like basically he's squatting on a toilet, which I guess is his most favorite natural posture anyway. So no surprise there, but he's been bragging on the death rate, saying we're doing great, and it's one of the best in the world, and no one really knows why that's happening. And I guess the deal is he's got a chart with him that says that I guess among the people who contract coronavirus in this country, the death rate of those folks is relatively low compared to the rest of the world. And I guess that's a possibility. I think we were running at something around 5% of for a while, we were running at about 5+% of the people who contracted coronavirus in the United States dying. Whereas in certain of the European nations, among the first hard hit in the world, the rates at which people were dying once they contracted coronavirus were higher. And I guess they gave him a chart, and I don't know whether they handpicked the countries or what that were on. They must have handpicked the countries included on there because he had the most simplistic looking bar chart with about 5 or 6 countries on it. People were commenting this morning. I saw somebody saying, it looks like somebody prepared a profit statement for their 8-year-old's lemonade stand to show them the idea of a profit and loss statement or something. This simplified chart. He's dealing with a pandemic that's killed 159,000 Americans at this point, and he's got a little thing that says America, England, Japan, whatever, and comparing it to other countries. I don't even know. They might have picked countries that have had horrible experiences with their death rates, although the UK is one of them. But he's arguing with Jonathan Swan over it, and Swan's like, I see what you're doing. Once again, Trump insists, look at my charts. This is the second or third interview in a very short period of time that has utilized the same technique. It's never worked. I'm not really sure why they keep going back. He shows the chart to Swan. Swan says, oh, okay, you're looking at deaths per number of, deaths per infection or deaths per case. I'm talking about deaths as a percentage of your population. What percentage of your population is getting coronavirus and dying? And Trump just says, well, you can't do that. And There's no explanation other than I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know how statistics work. The ones they gave me are different, and I recognize that. And you can't do that. You can't use another measure. Why not? I don't know. Because. And then, the other clips that are circulating, him talking about the pandemic, admitting that people have died. Yeah, it is what it is. Various other disasters, and I don't even know what to tell you about it. We could go over it some more. I guess I'll watch it afterwards. I couldn't stand to. I only discovered it late at night. I don't know, why do they release these things that late, or I don't know. Anyway, for some reason I only discovered it between like 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. last night, and I thought I can't really put a half an hour into watching this thing. And in the morning, of course, who wants to do that with their morning? So I'll give it a shot afterwards because it just seems important to see this whole thing. Also, lots of valid complaints about this is hard to watch, how stupid he is. Lots of also very interesting meta discussion about Jonathan Swan. He's done a great job in demonstrating that the president that he's, how do you say it, right? He's too stupid to hold this job, and too stupid to hold any job, really, as people pointed out when I tweeted this last night. Just too dumb for the job. And somebody followed up with, at Burger King, which is also true. And so, okay, well done in that it was demonstrated nicely. But then, of course, people have the valid complaints of, why is it such an extraordinary thing? He's extraordinarily dumb, and anybody who asks a question of him will see how dumb he is instantly, and why didn't more of us see that? I mean, we all saw it, but why didn't more of America see it? Why did they allow themselves to vote for this idiot? And isn't this really the minimum you should expect from interviewers of all sorts? Why does it take special talent to show that one of the dumbest people in the world is dumb? And yeah, that's a valid complaint too. And it's frustrating to have that one. Anyway, I don't know. I guess it's reflected here in Bill's morning tweet, as it often will be the case, especially when there's an opportunity to show how dumb the president is. And it does let us all know that Daily Kos Radio is live. This much you've been able to discover for yourself. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, the interviewer, not Jonathan Swan. It says it can prove that it's live, that is this show, and I can by fumbling my words. If this were edited, it would be a much cleaner show. If you look at the charts, and if you look at the lines and graphs, you see it's live. Very, very live. More live than we've ever seen. But the press is so unfair. They'll never acknowledge it. And that's also, by the way, the bulk of the interview. It's very Trumpy, to be certain. And the other valid complaint, that he will not stop his accordion hands. I see Bill has made that complaint. I see on the Daily Kos diaries that Annie Lee documents it that way. Trump and his accordion hands get interviewed by Jonathan Swan. It's a disaster. 10 different ways. So many things to say about it, and many of them have been said. And so, I don't know. You could go around and collect them, or you could just come here and listen to me tell you about them. I noticed, so let's see, Sam Stein, was it this morning? I'll have to check in with my Twitter feed here as it comes through, and as I sent it back out. Yeah, here he is. Watch the Axios, pardon me. Wow, that one, I just opened my mouth and new frog just jumped in from out of nowhere. Usually already in there. This one came from, I don't know where. No one can tell. But Sam Stein commenting, watch the Axios video in its entirety. That's dangerous. And couldn't help but think back to the Couric-Palin interviews. Second person I happened to catch this morning making the comparison, which in turn had me thinking a fair bit about the way gender affects our perception of political competence. And, I understand the message here. It's good to think about things that way and to think about delivering the diagnosis in an even-handed way. But two very, very stupid people interviewed by fairly competent. I don't know how I think of Katie Couric. I don't watch a lot of Jonathan Swan either, but I don't know. I think being on a morning news program, to me, does something to diminish the seriousness of it. And I don't know why, although maybe that's Sam's point here, is how gender affects our perception of political competence. She was a perfectly competent interviewer with Sarah Palin and did a great job revealing how stupid she was. So the two of them have both done a great job. And yet here I don't know if I think of Jonathan Swan as super serious or anything, but I don't think of him as a morning TV guy either. So I fall prey to the same thing. But here there are, I think, still considerably more voters who think that Donald Trump is getting unfair treatment, that he's really an effective president, maybe solely because he's male. And even among people who, there's certainly conservative bias, and there are lots of conservatives who thought that Sarah Palin was competent, but I always got the sense that they were pretending somehow. Let's see. Here's another of the clips that caught my attention here. Noticed that Katie Fang of NBC commenting on here that Trump is like a wind-up toy that doesn't know when to shut up. It is the clip captured here of Trump complaining about mail-in voting, another big topic, both of the interview and of the day, and saying, so now we have a new phenomena. It's called mail-in voting. This was another one of his fantastic tells, by the way, is when he throws in the phrase, it's called. All right, he doesn't know what he's talking about. This is something brand new to him. It's called mail-in voting. And Jonathan Swan says, new, it's been here since the Civil War. And again, Trump stymied, but then stumbles right past it. And the rest of that clip is Trump insisting on the craziness of mail-in voting. You know what they're doing? There are Democrat governors all over this country. They're mailing out millions of ballots to they don't even know who. And then Swan says, well, they're mailing out applications. It's secretaries of state in the various states, some Republican states too, and they're mailing out applications for people to apply for mail-in ballots. And Trump pauses for a second. It looks like he considers answering, saying, no, ballots. But I guess he knows that that's not true, or he doesn't understand the difference between an application and an actual ballot. And he just pushes right forward and says, they're sending, I have a friend. Oh, God, here we go. I got a friend. His son died tragically 7 years ago. He gets a ballot in the mail for his son. Well, an application. There are people getting ballots for dogs, okay? They don't know who they're sending these to. They're sending them out. Who knows what happens to them? But they're applications. They're not mail-in ballots. You still have to apply, and there's a whole process. Well, absentee balloting, which is okay, which is fine. That you have to apply, and you have to make, you have to guarantee that you are the president. Well, it's the same for mail-in ballots. It's the exact same process. No, So he insists on his story. It's, I don't know. You might have seen it by now. So, and if you haven't, I guess I don't want to spoil it for you. Let's see. There are other stories, of course. And Tuesday is a great day to bring them to you. It's especially good because we spent almost no time on the actual news yesterday. Greg did a great job talking about the news, but then he brought it on to the subject of the possible, or the impossible delay of the elections by through various shenanigans by the Trump team. And we talked about how unlikely that is to actually succeed, and read an article from David Frum about wargaming the situations out. And that actually very rarely came up, the idea of just simply stopping the election. But there was plenty of mischief to be had even after the election goes forward. That was very interesting, but it kept us all from exploring some of the other stories that are out there. One piece of some interest, I guess. Let me see if it all leads back to Ben Jacobs writing for New York Magazine about his peek under the hood, I guess, not the Klan hood, but the car hood of the Kanye West campaign, which is still a thing, sort of, insofar as it ever was. And of course, it reveals pretty much exactly what you thought it was going to reveal, which, Ben Jacobs, I guess, smart guy, and said, I bet I could reveal exactly what we all think we could reveal if I look at this thing, but no one has done it yet, and so, enterprising me, I will go ahead and do that. And here's the story. The headline, as headlines do, will sum this up. 2 people linked to Kanye West's campaign are active in GOP politics. The good old GOP. That's who's working this thing. And for it's essentially supposed to confirm for all the people who worried that Kanye West was mentally ill, for one thing, but who worried that Kanye West's campaign, if he were to actually launch it and run it and put his money behind it, and whenever you put money behind a campaign, it becomes a dangerous campaign. That the whole idea was to siphon off votes for people who, I guess the idea was siphon off votes from people who hate Trump and cannot vote for him, but could be, for whatever reason, weaned away from the idea of voting for Joe Biden. Maybe even liberal-minded people who would say, yes, Joe Biden bores me and Kanye West somehow excites me, or is not Joe Biden, or whatever. And the concern was, well, what if Republicans are the ones doing this, knowing that he'll get, a very tiny percentage of the vote, comparatively speaking, but that it might be enough to siphon off the winning margin from Biden. And so it should surprise no one that it's Republicans not only hyping the campaign, but making it go. Kanye West having, I guess, probably a relatively difficult time figuring out how to mount a presidential campaign because it's a pretty massive undertaking. So professionals have been brought in from the Republican Party. It's just that I guess Kanye West may or may not know, but probably doesn't know that the people he's bringing in are people whose loyalties are first to the Republican Party, and using him as a tool for the Republican Party's aims. That will surprise him, apparently. At least 2 people with links to Kanye West's nascent presidential campaign are also active in Republican Party politics, we're told here. Asked by Intelligencer. That's the... I don't know what... you know what? I skipped the paragraph here, but the Intelligencer is the column here in New York Magazine. One of West's electors, here are the 2 people, one of West's electors in the state of Vermont, the Electoral College, those guys, you got to name who will be your electors should you pull off the miracle of winning the electoral votes from Vermont. One of West's electors in Vermont will also be a delegate to the Republican National Convention in Charlotte, which, by the way, being held in secret, apparently. It's now moved back to Charlotte. Jacksonville's been canned after having been picked up for the canned Charlotte. It's now back in Charlotte, but I noticed the other day the announcement was closed to the press. There has not been a Republican or any party's national convention in the modern era closed to the press. It just doesn't happen. And it'll be interesting as Trump, no doubt, claims a convention bounce nonetheless, even though no one saw his convention. I'll bet he'll do it anyway. So, okay, one of the delegates to the Republican National Convention in Charlotte is Chuck Wilton, who's also happens to be one of the 3 electors that West's presidential campaign named in a filing submitted with the Vermont Secretary of State on Monday. So that's kind of interesting. He's also been elected by the Vermont Republican Party in May, as it says, to serve as a delegate for President Trump at this year's RNC. He'll be one of the few people that are allowed inside, I guess. Asked by Intelligencer if he was the same person who was listed as a delegate, Wilton replied, "Yep, that would be me." He said, he's not secretive about it, said he had been involved in politics in Vermont for years and had been connected to the West campaign through political contacts. How frustrating to be Republican in Vermont. But occasionally they steal the governorship, so it has its rewards, I'm sure. Somebody said that Vermont needs electors for certain people. Not the ones I support, but certain people, let's say. And it was something I said I'm more than willing to do, Wilton explained. He described himself politically as conservative libertarian / center-right, adding that he was, quote, not disappointed with Trump, but wanted to search out some more alternatives to him. Wilton said that he thought West was center-right just like him, which is why he's going to the Republican National Convention. Okay. The RNC did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Wilton was the second person with ties to the GOP to be linked to the West presidential campaign on Monday. A prominent Republican operative, Greg Keller, was listed as the campaign's point of contact in a filing with the Arkansas Secretary of State. Keller, who did not respond to repeated requests for comment, is the former executive director of the American Conservative Union and has worked for a number of prominent Republican politicians, including Mitt Romney and the execrable Josh Hawley. West has expressed his opposition to abortion on Twitter and at a campaign event in South Carolina last month. Everybody saw that one, which is as much a Twitter event as a campaign event, and met with Trump wearing a Make America Great Again hat at the White House in 2018. He has since backed away from his support for Trump, but did tell Forbes in July, Trump is the closest president we've had in years to allowing God to still be part of the conversation. Okay. West's campaign has faced a number of stumbles in recent weeks while trying to get the rapper on the ballot this November, but the campaign did successfully file to appear on the ballot in Arkansas. You see about that one, and that's where Keller came up. West Virginia and Vermont on Monday. Those are big electoral powerhouses. The signatures he submitted for the first two states, Arkansas and West Virginia, still need to be validated. Vermont does not require any petitioning to appear on the ballot. Oh, I should go. The rapper is also pushing forward with efforts to get on the ballot in two key swing states this week. In Wisconsin, which Donald Trump won by fewer than 23,000 votes in 2016, there are 45 people on the ground working to get West on the ballot. He needs to collect and submit at least 2,000 valid signatures in that state by Tuesday evening. In Ohio, West is pushing to collect the 5,000 valid signatures needed to appear on the ballot, which have to be submitted on Wednesday. His campaign still faces a number of hurdles, including a hearing in New Jersey on Tuesday morning over allegations that signatures submitted to get West on the ballot in that state were forged. Sounds fun. West would need to appear on the ballot in some combination of states totaling 270 electoral votes in order to participate in the presidential debates. The Commission on Presidential Debates, the nonpartisan group that has moderated presidential debates since 1988, requires candidates meet that threshold as well as having at least 15% support in opinion polls. West is precariously short of missing the second threshold, and even if he manages to stay on the ballot in every state where he has submitted signatures, the rapper would need to almost run the table for ballot access in the remaining states and would need to make the ballot in California, which requires nearly 200,000 signatures that must be submitted by Thursday. The West campaign did not respond to a request for comment. How do they do it? All right, well, that's what's up with Kanye West and the Republicans disguising themselves as West operatives for the purpose of siphoning off Biden votes. It's a thing. They're doing it, and we should keep an eye on it. Let's see. We have here, another note from the crazy-ass interview observed by Josh Lederman, another NBC reporter here, pointing out that in this remarkable interview, Trump says that he canceled his New Hampshire rally due to concerns about crowds and COVID spread, which makes sense, of course. I mean, that was an excellent reason. That was a wonderful excuse for canceling the rally. We all think, of course, that he was worried about another flop like in Tulsa. But also, I mean, I guess by the time he canceled it, he wasn't aware of what a deadly flop Tulsa really was. The death toll now, of course, including someone he's heard of, Herman Cain, and dozens who he knows nothing about and cares nothing about. But anyway, the point is that this new revelation, whether it's true or not, contradicts the campaign's official explanation at the time, which was that the New Hampshire rally was postponed due to impending weather, which never materialized anyway, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just another of the stories wherein the people working for Trump are at pains to put together some sort of an excuse, and Trump then blurts out, either the truth or some different lie at some later date and throws everybody under the bus. and I don't know what. And then the reporters go, "Oh my gosh, we've been lied to again. It's so lousy." All right. Oh yes, here's the link I gave myself to the full interview, so I can share that with you. If I don't think it's possible for you to be awake long enough to be tuned into the show live and not have seen a link to this full interview, but you never know, and maybe it'll be of help to you if you'd like to peek in on it later on. What else have we got here? Yes, I didn't read Karen Tumulty's piece on the air yesterday, and now it feels like old news, except that it was about Trump having promised a health care plan, a full and complete, as he said, a health care plan 2 weeks ago in his interview with Chris Wallace, and then Karen Tumulty very diligent in counting down the days until, of course, we found out she gave him till Monday, really, to sign the thing. Remember, he said he was going to sign it within 2 weeks. And she was very careful about it. She went back and forth over whether or not she ought to count from Friday when he gave the interview or from Sunday when the interview aired. Not only did she count from Sunday, she gave him the benefit of the doubt to wait until Monday. And he hasn't, to no one's surprise, there never was any sort of health care plan. But he apparently continues to insist that there is one. And that once again, within a very short period of time, perhaps 2 weeks, he does in fact plan to sign it. And he once again reiterates that this is a plausible thing for him to be promising. How come let's have the music, please. There we go. Okay, a few seconds late here. Always a mystery when the main computer decides not to play along. Anyway, apparently he's decided to promise the same thing again in the same time period. So I guess it's just amazing to me. I guess the people who give him these charts to argue with Jonathan Swan with don't ever tell him, people are starting to catch on to the 2-week thing. You should maybe stop using that. It's become quite a tell. We'll be right back. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Like I said, the music a few seconds behind here, so coming back at a rather awkward point in the music, but okay. As we were leaving, I had mentioned Karen Tumulty diligently tracking the 2-week promissory period, can we call it that, for the Donald Trump full and complete health care plan. But apparently it was not enough for him, and he learned no lessons from... I mean, I did wonder whether he afterwards said, geez, I really ought to get cracking on this thing and have somebody put something together. 2 weeks is not a whole lot of time to put a bill like this together. It's interesting that even, 3.5 years into his presidency, he thinks that a full and complete health care plan is something that, with diligent effort, 2 weeks, should be enough to even put together a written plan. But he also probably thinks, how long do people need to vote on it in Congress? You write it, you give it to them, they vote on it. Why don't you just, ism, working once again. And, it doesn't work, of course. But maybe in his mind, it's indicative of how little he has learned about the way the job he has is supposed to work. But he learned no lesson from it, which is what I was saying, because he immediately went back out and said the same thing. Karen tweeted last night Here we go again, and grab this. I don't know. Is this transcript from? Maybe it's the Axios interview, and it was the first clip I saw from it. And she didn't identify where it was coming from. If you've seen it, maybe you recognize it. The quotes here are: "I do want to say that we're going to be introducing a tremendous healthcare plan sometime prior." Now he knows. I think somebody said to him, the 2-week thing. Everybody knows it. So that gear is turning, but he can't on his feet come up with something new. I do want to say that we're going to be introducing a tremendous healthcare plan sometime hopefully prior to the end of the month. It's just completed now, right? So again, 2 weeks. Well, needs to be more than that. People are catching me the 2 weeks. So sometime before the end of the month. That's it's a lot of weeks. It's 3+ weeks. But okay, that's cushion in his mind, right? But he doesn't want you to think that he's been lying about the last 2 weeks, that he told you it was going to be signed by then. So he says it's just completed now. We finished it. It's all done. No one has seen it. It's 1/6 of the economy, but I have refused to show it to anyone. No one has any idea what's in it. It doesn't exist, but that doesn't matter. I'm just going to talk about it more and more. And there's another paragraph worth of stuff here. In addition, he says, next month we'll be doing the immigration plan. So 2 big things that he promised, of course, as a candidate. I'm going to have a beautiful, beautiful healthcare plan. It's going to be replaced with something terrific. And we're going to totally redo the whole immigration thing. And 3.5 years into it, he's done nothing but, on immigration, he's done a lot, but it's been nothing but bothering people who are already here and threatening them with things, and then putting up, little sections of wall that get blown down in sandstorms, hurricanes, whatever they may be. Anyway, now he's going to fix that too. So next month we'll also be doing immigration. We're going to be doing that in September. We'll be doing sometime during this month the healthcare plan. And I think that'll be before the end of the month. And I think it'll be very impressive to a lot of people, which another one of his blank dodges, right? It's going to be impressive. Many people are saying it's going to be impressive to the many people that it's impressive to, which is another of his fun tactics, just saying the same thing over and over again. If you actually stop to think about what's in here, we're going to be doing a healthcare plan before the end of the month, but it's already complete. But also we're going to do immigration. So that's September. Next month we'll be doing immigration. Then he names what the next month is. That's September. Then we'll be doing during this month the thing I just told you already we were doing this month, but that it's already done, but we're going to be doing it some more for the rest of the month. That's healthcare. And so that'll be before the end of the month, because this is the month I'm talking about that we're going to be doing it. So before that month is over, we're going to have done the thing that I was saying we were going to do during this month. Not next month, the next month, which is September, we're going to be doing immigration. So it's immigration in the month that comes next, which many people call September, whereas during this month, hopefully before the end of this month, because that's how months work, and it doesn't just flow into the next one. And if we say we're going to do it in August, many people don't know this, but there's a certain number of days in August, and once you get past that days, then you're into what they call September, and that is the next month. Month is the word we use for these things. They separate them. They're all days, of course. They all start the same way, breakfast and pooping in the golden toilet. But they're different if you look at it. Many people don't know this. I think we're all aware that there are days, there's Mondays and Tuesdays and Sundays, and also some other days. There's 7. Many people don't know that either. But this is something that really surprised me. I found that out. And so there's 7 of them, and they go around and around in circles. But if you look at it, right, they also go around and around in circles in these things called months. And when they use months, they put enough of them together and you get a year. This is something that it makes no sense, really. The only thing they can do is they keep track of it with numbers, and they say how many years we've had. And you go on and on. But many people, they point out, look, life, it just happens. It goes on. And this is the way we mark time and find out which day or month we're in. And we use these calendars. And anyway, we're going to do these beautiful, beautiful healthcare and immigration plans. And many people people get hung up on what month we're going to do it in, and it really doesn't matter. But I just wanted to say, for those people keeping track of those things, this month is going to be beautiful, beautiful healthcare. Probably, in all likelihood, finished this month. It's already done, but probably by the end of this month. And then next month, which comes after the end of this month, you get the idea? It's literally the same thing over and over again. We could do the whole show about that, I suppose. But no lesson learned whatsoever. And still thinks that he can promise a full and complete health care to everyone by what? And who cares, right? He doesn't even understand time. All right. So that's out there. We're going to have to kind of deal with that. Oh, speaking of the weird fraud, I suppose you could call it, that's going on in the Kanye West campaign of Republican operatives posing as someone else. I happened to notice this little nugget out there as well. Our good Twitter friend John Whitehouse, Existential Fish, pointing out for us here that in his capacity as news director at Media Matters, pointing out that the Fox News flagship news program doing a piece on Maryland schools. I don't know if we've discussed the fact that Maryland's schools, I guess, the relevant authorities in Montgomery County, Maryland, ordered not only public but private schools not yet to open. They've ordered them to remain closed for the time being until the pandemic is better under control, in order to avoid uncontrolled spread among the students and faculty and other workers at the school and the families who love them. But of course, having to present both sides, they needed to feature a concerned private school parent there in Maryland, and the concerned parent that they found on the street to speak to is Tim Carney, which surprised a lot of people because he's a Washington Examiner columnist and a well-known conservative pundit, and they billed him as just a regular concerned American parent worried about their private school kids and why they wouldn't be able to return to the classroom, and no indication of, this would be someone who's busy writing columns and spinning about these things. An interesting catch. Just once again, Republicans trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. One of many such instances, and of course there's the famous Republican women's focus groups that they keep doing on TV. Was that CBS used to conduct those all the time? And they didn't tell anybody that they had populated their focus group with RNC delegates and county Republican committee chairs from Florida and Georgia. In this whole thing, they were just regular American folk that had interesting things to say about Donald Trump and the way he was running the country. Like talking to a living diner. Anyway, so that's that too happening again. More reports of schools opening up to doubtless dismal results. Happened to see this photo being widely circulated on Twitter thanks to the account under the handle of Free Your Mind Kid, and sending around a picture. No credit whether there's no indication of whether he took the picture himself or got it from his relatives or just found it on the internet. First day of school in what is claimed to be Paulding County, Georgia. Look, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Crowded high school hallways. Dozens of kids visible in this photo. It's taken like above the heads of kids making their way through the hallways, and they are shoulder to shoulder and front to back. And I see about 2 masks in this photo, and we're predicting disaster. Well, we always have, but predicting more disaster, I guess, now in Paulding County, Georgia, as well as pretty much everywhere else in Georgia. And that goes along with, another snippet in the Twitter news over yet another college football program suspended over COVID-19 spread. Let's see, this one at Indiana State now suspending football practice and conditioning for 14 days after 6 players tested positive for COVID-19. That's a lot of numbers, but you know how they do things in football. COVID-19, 6 players, conditioning suspended for 14 days, hike, I guess. All football players, coaches, and support personnel are in quarantine, everybody now in quarantine, and will be tested for COVID-19 per school release. And then 3 weeks later, when they get the results back, something. I guess they'll resume practice only to find out that the rest of the league has suspended their games too, because nobody's going to be able to do this. That's all there really is to it. So, all right, it's been an exciting couple of weeks watching those things happening. For those of you who were around last night on Twitter waiting for an update, I think you've probably figured it out by now on how did it go cracking open the weird unopened bottle of Irish Mist from the 1970s discovered at the in-laws' house just the other day. The answer is I'm still alive, but sometimes these poisonings take some time to set in. But I have a feeling we're going to get away with this. And it's super crazy sweet, this stuff. And I don't know whether it always is. I have nothing to compare it to. So I can't tell you whether it's better, worse, or indifferent with it having been bottled in about 1978, 1979 and sat unopened until then. But I did read on the internet, which always has the truth about health-related issues, no matter where you look, that, it's going to be okay, and that an unopened bottle of liquor will have an indefinite shelf life. So I'm counting on that. Let's see. What other things have we to share here? I don't know, more about the crazy interview. Let's go over to Pocket, which is mostly populated with pre-Axios interview stories, to try to borrow from some other interesting things here. Let's see. We did talk about that one. The Michigan State Senator who was a COVID truther who wound up contracting the disease as well. Yes. Here's something that one of our good friends has shared with us in the last day or so. Let me see if I can't dig this provenance up here. Is it Patrick Snyder sending us this fun one here? A good warning. We've heard from this account on Twitter before. This is a very interesting turn of events, I guess. We've read Twitter threads from the Uncle Blazer, the Uncle Blazer account. We've read from time to time, and sometimes they're very conspiratorial sounding, conspiracy theorist type stuff. But very often they've been relatively grounded, or at least relatively plausible theories. But I was always, they were always interesting and exciting to read about, more so than most conspiracy theory things that are a little more transparent about their kookiness. But they seem to make some plausible sense. Uncle Blazer thinks that. But now there's some weird confusion about what has happened to the account, and, well, I don't know how else to put it, except that Patrick points me to a Twitter thread from Seth Abramson, who I always think of as occupying similar space, really, but from a different angle. And I very rarely read Seth Abramson Twitter threads aloud on the air. They feel, believe it or not, they feel a little bit more speculative to me than even the Uncle Blazer ones, although I think really the reality is it's probably reversed. A lot of his work, Seth Abramson, I guess if you squint and look at it just right, he says a lot of it has borne out over the years. And I don't know. I've never really trusted either of them, but I found the Uncle Blazer speculations that were identified as such to be more interesting, or I don't know, somehow more intricate and interesting than the Seth Abramson ones. However, a lot of them were shared with me by Patrick, who now sends me this one which is an interesting note of caution. I think he sent me like the fifth of the tweets in the thread, but I'll start up at the top here. And Seth Abrams starts out by saying, in 5 years, I've never accused anyone of being a foreign disinformation agent. That changes today. As scary things are happening I need to talk about and Twitter needs to grapple with involving a dangerous, anonymous disinformation feed. I hope you'll read on and retweet, he says. We'll read anyway, that much we can do. The anonymous disinformation feed I discuss in this thread is not Uncle Blazer, but Blazer Legacy. Is that a different Twitter feed, or sometimes he calls they have the Twitter address and then there's sort of the handle that they attach to it. But yeah, Blazer Legacy, using a very similar header art here, but not entirely clear whether this is the same person or not. But the disinformation feed I discuss, Seth says, is Blazer Legacy. This account is increasingly popular, also increasingly unhinged, as he puts it, a source of disinformation about the election and critics of the president. It has all the hallmarks of a coordinated foreign campaign. As anyone who reads my feed knows, Seth says, I have a book coming out in September. Insert wry joke about self-promotion here. This will be the first book in the New York Times best-selling Proof series that comes out right before an election. Proof of Collusion, his prior book, I guess, came out just after the midterms. There's been an understandable fear among those who've previously been identified by the White House, as I have by Sarah Huckabee Sanders, as being among the president's chief critics. I'm sure he's happy about that. That as we get closer to Election Day, attempts to sow confusion online could target Trump critics. There was a particular fear in my case among readers of this feed and people associated with my research because everyone knew that the first two Proof books had been New York Times bestsellers, but that now, for the first time, a Proof book would be dropping just before a general election. That said, and this is the tweet that Patrick referred me to, this thread isn't going to be just about me. It's about a group of people who have been among the highest profile critics of Donald Trump on Twitter, particularly those who've authored books about him, as all are being targeted by this disinformation account now. During the period Proof of Collusion from 2018 and Proof of Conspiracy of 2019 came out, there was an anonymous feed called Uncle Blazer. Not the famous actor with that handle, but someone using the same nickname, run by someone, man or woman, we don't know, claiming to be a lawyer. I didn't even realize that there was an Uncle Blazer famous actor, but okay. That feed followed mine, the old Uncle Blazer feed, and on occasion made mention of mine, though as I recall we didn't interact more than once or twice. Often the feed would draft off my content as I worked as hard as anyone on the internet, I think most would agree, he says, to offer criticism of this president. He's very proud of himself. That's fine. That feed, Uncle Blazer, is now defunct. That I had heard that, and we haven't heard much from them. So, abandoned by an anonymous author after it had accrued over 100,000 followers on Twitter. The well-known anti-Trump podcast Mueller, she wrote, had someone claiming to be anyway, Uncle Blazer on air at least once before he was a he during the podcast anyway, disappeared. I never paid much attention to that feed when it was extant, besides one exchange I remember in which I disagreed with something this anonymous person said. So I can't now say if they were stealing content from lawyers online or appeared to have any legal knowledge themselves. At some point, the feed disappeared. Like I said, I do recall that happening vaguely, which was odd given how large it had gotten. I remember hearing about the to-do at the time. Apparently, the anonymous person said they were being criticized too much. Perhaps too many questions about identity were being asked, so they ghosted. If I'm hazy on the history pre-ghosting, it's because the ghosting was where the strange stuff began happening. And again, prior to that, I'd only rarely paid any attention to this feed. I don't respect or credit anyone claiming to be a lawyer anonymously. That's dangerous. Okay. What happened after this 100,000 plus follower account anonymously claiming to be run by a lawyer but stealing some content analysis from named Twitter verified lawyer accounts disappeared in this anonymous person. What happened after this anonymous person disappeared kept popping up with new accounts and then destroying them. I do recall that happening as well. What these new accounts had in common is they didn't sound like the same person as Uncle Blazer, or sounded like some unhinged progression of the Uncle Blazer persona. They spent their time almost exclusively attacking Trump's top critics under the guise of resistance. The content of the attacks was nonsensical, and their format harassment, sometimes different account names. Whenever too much heat would come down on a particular new anonymous feed connected to the old Uncle Blazer persona, the new anonymous account would be destroyed. All coherent legal analysis was gone, seemingly confirming that any prior analysis had been taken from legitimate accounts. The focus now was solely on harassing Trump critics, particularly Trump critics with big followings on Twitter. Criticism of Trumpist accounts was absent. As many of you reading this likely experienced firsthand, anyone who questioned the identity of these Uncle Blazer-themed anonymous accounts was immediately blocked. Anyone who questioned the Trump criticism coordinated by these accounts was also immediately blocked. Not surprisingly, the Trump critics being attacked by this entity, and it can only be referred to as an entity, as no one in America knows the identity or location of the authors of such feeds, blocked all Uncle Blazer affiliated accounts, which led to some telling results. The Uncle Blazer persona continued to have no difficulty seeing all tweets published by Trump critics who had blocked it, suggesting a ring of anonymous accounts already confirmed by how many accounts this persona had used, designed to harass and surveil Trump critics. As tellingly, besides the multiple accounts, persistent anonymity, sudden account deletions, online stalking, singular focus on discrediting Trump critics, and a lack of apparent legal knowledge, the Uncle Blazer entity began clearly refining its tactics, message, and persona. When Sarah Kendzior, a top Trump critic, I'll agree there, came out with her New York Times bestseller, Hiding in Plain Sight, Uncle Blazer began attacking her. When proof of corruption was announced, it began attacking me. As Mueller, she wrote, transitioned to a 2020-focused format, it began attacking it. More creepily, the account began, like QAnon, to claim that it had inside knowledge of the U.S. intelligence community. Suddenly, it seemed to be intimating it knew what the FBI, CIA, and other intelligence assets were up to with respect to various Trump-related investigations. Whereas the original Uncle Blazer entity had played the role of a lawyer offering analysis, this version of the entity knew who was a traitor to the United States from knowing what the U.S. intelligence community was up to, and all the traitors were Trump critics. I don't claim to know things I don't know. Okay. I don't know the identity or location of disinformation agents behind the Uncle Blazer entity, but I see no evidence of legal training, a singular obsession with Trump's critics, and I worry about this. He attaches here the New York Times piece about Eric Prince recruiting ex-spies to help infiltrate liberal circles. We remember hearing about that one some time ago. This entity claims to be part of a true resistance to Trump, though it spends almost all its time attacking Trump's critics. It uses an identifiable meme, the long-since deleted Uncle Blazer milieu, without anyone being able to trace if it's connected to that old feed. And here's where it gets scary. And let's see if we get scared by this one. This feed now claims that is Seth Abramson, I'm being investigated by the FBI. It claims I'll shortly be arrested. It claims I'm a direct agent of Putin and the Kremlin. Remember, this is an anonymous feed attacking a wildly public, and verifiable person who's accounted one of Trump's chief critics. I can't believe I have to do this, as I'm just a college professor in New Hampshire with the longest, most transparent history one could imagine. We'll see. But for anyone confused, here's the staggeringly comprehensive story of my life from my personal website, which you can trust because he wrote it. It's not exactly the most solid proof in the world, but okay. At least I know now what he does for a living, chiefly. Most concerning about the Uncle Blazer entity is that it is building a following with a very specific narrative. When it's not accusing Trump critics of being Kremlin agents, just the gambit we might expect Prince to orchestrate, it has a bizarre story it wants to tell. As many of you know, I recently posted an audio commentary here on Twitter regarding the forthcoming Volume 5 of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence's Counterintelligence Report. That audio commentary can be heard below, and there's a link to it. When not calling Trump's critics Kremlin agents, the Uncle Blazer entity is singularly obsessed with convincing critics of this president that Volume 5 is going to nab Trump, unmasking him as a fully recruited Kremlin agent and ending his political career immediately. Oh, hooray, that would be great. This is crazy. It's not going to happen. It isn't what Volume 5 is. It's not how the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence works. It's not what major media reporting on Volume 5 tells us. It's not consistent with history, e.g. the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence said in 2019 that it found no hacking conspiracy. If you look at this Uncle Blazer feed, and I'd look fast as it'll go poof, just like all the other entities in this ring of accounts as soon as the heat is turned up too high, keep in mind that all dissenting commenters get immediately blocked by the feed's owners. Just so, remember that Uncle Blazer is not and has not ever been just one account. It's a ring of accounts that purport to be different people. What this means is that at least some of the feed's commenters are likely to be the feed's owners posting under fake accounts. And, we don't like that. It's a poor practice, but something you can do to populate a feed, I suppose. The current Uncle Blazer entity feed was founded within the last 30 days. It already has well over 20,000 followers. Needless to say, that takes some doing and a lot of foreign bots. This new face of the entity, as the servant accounts are used to stalk Trump critics, make fake comments on the main account, and so on, as I said, obsessed with this Senate report. For the life of me, I couldn't really figure out what it would be, and I'm still not sure. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Quickly becoming the Seth Abramson report here. I think when I originally looked at this thing, it was considerably shorter. I don't know how long he spent putting this thing together, but one of the problems and one of the difficulties I have with reading Seth Abramson threads, aside from the quality of their content, is they tend to be 700 and 800 tweets long. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not by much. This continues after saying, look, I can't figure out for the life of me why this obsession with the Senate report, but we need to know the feed's focus is an event already assured not to harm Trump. As the SSCI already said, it agreed with Mueller in 2019. It's a bipartisan report. Even Trump lieutenant and QAnon lover, Director of National Intelligence Ratcliffe, isn't trying to block its release pre-election, and that's a clue. Which brings me to the unusual photo I used atop this thread. For the first time ever, a Shutterstock stock image, and my use of the word foreign in my first tweet, despite, of course, not having the ability that Twitter has to trace where this feed's author are located. In the same way, I used a stock image atop this thread. What the person or persons behind the Uncle Blazer account have done is create a stock member of the resistance. I'll note for the millionth time, not a term or concept or movement with which I've ever associated myself. I don't even know if that's even, that to me feels like Antifa. You just sort of throw it out there as resistance. You don't join and get a card or anything. But okay. The Uncle Blazer persona is a cartoon of Trump, small r, resistance, what a right-wing troll might think resisting Trump is about. Note the hackneyed themes. Trump's about to be nabbed. He's a fully recruited Kremlin agent. The feds are heroes swooping in to rescue us. It's a rehash of what the resistance, #resistance, fringe was pushing before the Mueller report's release. All of us can agree that the scope of that report was smaller than anyone expected, and the media coverage of it deflated what should have been nevertheless stunning revelations. If you follow the far right as closely as I do, Seth Abramson, not just by warring with them, but by reading their media and checking in on their community discussion boards on Reddit and 4chan and elsewhere, you know that they consider the Mueller report among Trump's greatest victories. The Mueller report, as covered by the media, what it actually said was stunning, coupled with Mueller's underwhelming congressional testimony, was the culmination of the Ma-Russia theme, like Ma-Heritage, Ma-Russia theme, meme rather, the right began pushing in 2017. Sad resistors chasing vain, silly hopes down a rabbit hole. We can't know the full deal surrounding the Uncle Blazer entity, but we can see that its activities are consistent with the pre-election foreign troll operations in 2016, that it targets almost exclusively Trump critics, and that it's setting readers up for another fall. This is very interesting. And I guess part of the reason that I never found myself interested in the successor accounts, they didn't seem to be focused on the same thing. I never followed, I don't think, either maybe I did follow Uncle Blazer eventually, but then by the time I followed, he was pretty much wrapping that up. And I did happen to see a lot of successor accounts discussing things, but they never seemed to be of any real interest. And it might be that the Uncle Blazer content is just of a completely different nature than these supposed successor accounts is, and that's what raised his interest here. There is more here. Its conspiracy theories, the new Uncle Blazer accounts, take the shape of QAnon while seeking to appeal to the resistance fringe. Uncle Blazer, or in quotes anyway, knows what the U.S. intelligence community is up to, knows which Trump critics are traitors, and there's a massive conspiracy in the government to save America. Indeed, at the core of the Volume 5 obsession by the Uncle Blazer entity is the most astounding contention of all. The congressional Republicans and Democrats have secretly been working in cahoots with Trump's own intelligence apparatus to nab Trump as a Kremlin spy. For those who don't know, QAnon's core theory is that there's a secret cross-party, cross-branch conspiracy within the government to nab Nancy Pelosi and other Democratic leaders as being part of a devil-worshipping cult of cannibalistic pedophiles. No, I'm not kidding. This is where the word foreign comes in. As anyone who reads this feed knows, there are different paths to acting as an agent for another party under the law, and different ways that we use the word agent outside the law. They all apply in the Uncle Blazer instance. In the legal sense, an agent is someone who has been explicitly tasked by a principal to either A, act across a general scope of activities, making them a general agent, or B, in a narrow and special range of authorized actions, making them a special agent. Not an FBI special agent, but you get the idea. For example, the fringe of the resistors, largely defunct now in 2017, that said Trump was a special agent of Putin, i.e., Putin had explicitly and directly tasked him with achieving certain outcomes. In 2020, the Uncle Blazer entity claims, I've also been tasked by Putin. By comparison, when we use agent in a non-legal sense out in the regular world, though confusingly there is also some overlap here with how it's used in a counterintelligence sense, we include the possibility of someone being an unwitting agent of another person or entity. How does one become an unwitting agent of another person or entity, including a foreign person or entity? Well, you may have come under the influence of or been compromised by leverages or promises from such a person or entity to act unknowingly towards certain outcomes. In other words, you may know and have spoken to the person who is, in a de facto sense, your principal, but you haven't been tasked with an illicit final outcome. Rather, you've been led down the primrose path to voluntarily do things that will lead to a certain result. This is very wordy, isn't it? Obviously, an unwitting agent can eventually become a witting agent. Indeed, the degree of influence, leverage, compromise, and or affinity can soon become so great that the de facto principal explicitly requests or demands that a more witting agent relationship be created. We must also, with someone like Donald Trump, explore a middle ground between witting and unwitting.
though almost certainly not someone who was ever formally, explicitly, and directly recruited by the Kremlin to act as a Kremlin agent, Trump knows his actions benefit Putin. In other words, Trump hasn't accidentally, without realizing or appreciating the consequences of his actions, spent 4 years, arguably 7 since 2013, publicly speaking and acting in a way that redounds to Russia's benefit. But he's not a special agent, legally speaking. The Uncle Blazer entity, whether its owners are foreign or domestic, whether it's part of a Prince scheme or not, whether it's an alt-right troll or not, even if it's one embittered leftist out to destroy the Trump critics that he or she feels betrayed by, is aiding foreign purposes. No one in political Twitter knows the top anti-Trump doesn't know the top anti-Trump podcasts, except they don't know this one for whatever reason. But okay, it's not a specifically anti-Trump podcast, though I'm looking to increase that content. No one on political Twitter doesn't know Trump's top critics. No one who reads political nonfiction doesn't know the New York Times best-selling Trump book authors. Uncle Blazer is targeting all of these. Worse still, the entity has, if it is the same entity, exhibited the potential in the past to accrue 100,000 plus followers. It has already accrued 20,000 followers in 4 weeks, less than 100 days before an election, and that makes its disinformation scheme incredibly dangerous. I'm fighting back here, thank you for telling us why at the end, because I've always fought back against trolls and disinformation, though, candidly, it can be scary to do so, and you lose followers, and folks see you as off-topic, when frankly denying the power of trolls, foreign or otherwise, cost America big in 2016. Whoever's behind it, there's a scheme to systematically discredit Trump critics through an anonymous network of disinformation feeds that will never identify themselves, never stop blocking dissenters, never stop stalking their prey, and never stop spreading false info. I don't care what the hit to me from posting a thread like this is. Writing the Proof series and running this feed hasn't been a happy experience from the get-go. I do it because Trump is a danger to the country I love, and I took an oath to uphold the Constitution in 2001. Adam Schiff said on MSNBC last night, this would be a couple nights ago, I guess it would have been Friday, that Russia is engaged in active measures online to disrupt the election by sowing division and confusion in the American discourse. The pre-election disinformation campaign attacking Trump critics and spreading lies about Volume 5 does the same. Blazer legacy is dangerous. Accusing key Trump critics and authors of being under FBI surveillance and facing imminent arrest is dangerous, for reasons you can imagine that I don't need to delve into. Telling people there's a deep state anti-Trump conspiracy is dangerous. Telling tens of thousands of people that Congress is about to nab Trump pre-election is in contradiction to all major media reporting on the work and operation of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence is dangerous, as it could deflate Biden voters right before the election. And as there is little evidence that Twitter will act to suspend or ban accounts that falsely accuse American citizens working outside the government of being paid, or rather of being under FBI surveillance and subject to immediate arrest, all that can be done is to call these accounts out in this way. Ready? Conclusion. Except guess what? There's 400 conclusions. Conclusion 1, a Shutterstock image of a Russian troll is all we'll ever have of those seeking to disrupt the 2020 election via disinformation. They're faceless, anonymous feeds and rings of accounts offering stock resistance narratives that could be run by anyone from anywhere. Conclusion 2, my biography is as public as a biography can be. I've laid bare everything I've ever done. I've had trolls comb through my old cases, harass my employer, try very badly, to figure out what meta-modernism is, and in every instance, they've discovered how boring I am. Conclusion 3, I'm discovering that myself. Conclusion 3, to spice up their trolling, they made up false claims. I even had a lawyer, claim I'd never worked a felony case. I've worked hundreds, including homicides. I had people I've never met claiming to know me. Upshot, it's gotten very, very strange at times. Conclusion 4. But now, 13 weeks before an election, as I'm about to publish the most damning book on Trump published this year, very exciting, I and other Trump critics, including MSNBC analysts and other New York Times best-selling authors, are facing a coordinated disinformation attack that is scary. Conclusion 5, I won't be intimidated. I won't be silent. I'm exactly who I say and have proudly laid bare for 5 years now, my entire life. I stand by all I've written and all will write, and if Twitter won't stop libel involving the FBI and imminent arrests, I'll use my voice to do it. One more link to the biography, some screenshots of some of the dozens of false attacks on New York Times bestselling authors, MSNBC analysts, superlative Trump critic, for instance, Sarah Kendzior, by the Uncle Blazer entity. And that, there are some screenshots. There's some more. The Uncle Blazer entity is oddly obsessed with my forthcoming book, Proof of Corruption. A few of the entity's dozens of tweets about me being a disinformation agent and working for Putin, which is, it always helps that you will accuse that person of the same thing right back. It helps us so much figure out all what's going on here. There's more screenshots and then some postscripts and then some updates. It's incredible. It never stops with Seth Abramson. Years from now, many whose lives were normal and boring pre-Trump, including me, will emerge to write books, columns, and posts about how strange their lives got as soon as they became public Trump critics. My point, it's not the people, it's Trump's milieu seizing on the people. Okay? And then some more postscripts. I think it all looks quite odd from the outside looking in. Oh, you bet. But I know enough Trump critics in real life, normal folks like me who didn't think this would be their life from 2016 to 2020, to know that Trump world consumes normalcy, not just among its adherents, but its critics as well. It's a good point, too. A Spark Toro analysis, I don't know who that or what that is, of the Uncle Blazer entity reveals it accrued 22,694 followers in its first 4 weeks, while following no one. Per Spark Toro, there are some follower red flags. For instance, 90% of the followers have URL issues. No URL or a non-resolving profile URL. To put this in perspective, the Uncle Blazer entity's follower accrual pace in its first 4 weeks, while following no one, would see it accruing an astounding 350,000 followers per year while following 0. That's how successful this disinformation scheme aims to be. Keep in mind, by way of more updates here, follower accrual is slowest when a feed first appears, as the Uncle Blazer entity did 4 weeks ago. So if you've had a Twitter account for, say, 6 years, the Uncle Blazer entity would, at its initial accrual rate, accrue 2.1 million followers in that time. This does tend to go on about the Spark Toro analysis. And then I think this finally comes to an end at this point, along with a screenshot of Blazer Legacy blocked you. So fantastic. I think that pretty much really will wrap it up. But okay, the upshot of that probably could have been distilled down to something a little shorter. That needed a too long, didn't read summation, except, well, we read it. Seth Abramson warns you that if you used to follow Uncle Blazer and find the Uncle Blazer threads insightful, you will find that its supposed successor accounts are, in fact, dangerously close to being Russian troll bot type accounts bent on spending their time claiming to be the real resistance by tearing down other anti-Trump writers, not just Seth Abramson, but also apparently among many others, Sarah Kendzior too. I guess sort of a predictable response, but it came as a surprise that they would use the Uncle Blazer persona to do it, and I thought we should share all of that, as long as it was, share all of it because of the amount of time we had spent previously with a few Uncle Blazer threads that sounded plausible. I don't think we've stumbled into any of the Blazer legacy threads. They didn't hold the same interest. So I guess at the minimum, it's an interesting whatever happened to Uncle Blazer story. Okay. Let's see. Moving on to other bits and pieces of news. We haven't yet noted, I don't think, that in the judicial circles here in judicial branch still at work, appeals court, that would be the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, will rehear the case over Michael Flynn's charges. They've agreed to an en banc rehearing of the case, and the order to the judge below. A federal appeals court will revisit an earlier decision ordering a district court judge to allow the Department of Justice to withdraw its criminal charges against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals vacated the earlier decision in a brief order issued last Thursday, setting up a new round of arguments over the DOJ's controversial move to withdraw its case against Flynn. The full court will hear oral arguments on August 11th. So coming up, let's see. So, about a week from now. By which I mean a week from now. In a 2-1 ruling last month, a 3-judge panel on the circuit court ordered District Court Judge Emmett Sullivan to grant the DOJ's motion and suspend any further arguments on the move. 2 Republican-appointed judges held the majority in the decision over a single Democratic-appointed judge's dissent. The DOJ had stunned court watchers in May with its sudden reversal in the case, arguing that it no longer felt that it could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Flynn had lied to the FBI about his communications with a Russian diplomat in late 2016, even though the former National Security Advisor had previously pleaded guilty. Sullivan responded to the move by appointing an outside counsel to present an counter-argument against the DOJ dropping its charges to help with his decision-making. Flynn's lawyers filed a petition with the D.C. Circuit asking the court to order Sullivan to grant the DOJ's motion outright without any further briefing. The panel agreed, arguing that Sullivan did not have authority to extend the prosecution if the DOJ wanted to pull out. In this case, the district court's actions will result in specific harms to the exercise of the executive branch's exclusive prosecutorial power. Judge Naomi Rao, who was appointed to the D.C. Circuit by President Trump, wrote in the majority opinion in June. If evidence comes to light calling into question the integrity or purpose of an underlying criminal investigation, the executive branch must have the authority to decide that further prosecution is not in the interest of justice. Sullivan, earlier this month, asked the full D.C. Circuit to rehear the case, setting up an unusual scenario with a federal judge appealing a higher court's ruling as an active litigant. Beth Wilkinson, an attorney representing Sullivan, declined to comment. Earlier this year, Flynn pulled out of a plea agreement he had made with former special counsel Robert Mueller to cooperate with his investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 election. The retired 3-star Army general has been trying to retract his earlier guilty plea when the DOJ moved to drop its charges in May. Both the DOJ and Flynn now contend that the FBI investigation that led to Flynn's interrogation in early 2017 has been plagued with malfeasance. In an oversight hearing before the House on Tuesday, Attorney General William Barr defended the move in response to angry Democrats who accused him of working to protect the president's associates. I agree, the president's friends don't deserve special breaks, but they also don't deserve to be treated more harshly than other people, and sometimes that is a different decision to make. But that is what rule of law is, Barr told the House Judiciary Committee. We don't think any of the U.S. attorneys in the department would have prosecuted this case, partly because of the behavior of the FBI, but also because the evidence is not there to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, he added. A larger panel of 10 D.C. Circuit judges will now decide whether Sullivan should be allowed to fully explore the DOJ's unusual move. Judge Gregory Katsas, whom Trump appointed to the D.C. Circuit in 2017, recused himself from the case. Katsas had previously served in the White House counsel's office and worked on the president's response to the Mueller investigation. Okay, so at least a good recusal here. That, by the way, thanks to the Hill's Harper Neidig, Neidig. Hope I got the pronunciation somewhat right. And dated from, last Friday, Thursday, the 30th. So up to speed on that, and we're waiting about a week before arguments are made, and I guess keep an eye on the court watchers there. Empty Wheel and others who will probably be watching the live feed and letting us know just what the hell's going on in there as it happens. All right, let's see. Scrolling a little further back, what other larger stories can we get into? We got Joan off for the week, and hopefully enjoying some relaxing times in COVID-plagued the United States of America, of course. So probably hanging out at home, but having a good time, relaxing, I'm hoping. So we can cover some of the longer stories. We'll make the best out of it and dive into some of the stories that I've skipped because of how long they present. Although if I had known how long that Seth Abramson thread went on, I probably would have presented that in a different way, let's say. All right, let's see. A couple other... we've done a lot about the schools lately. Let's move on to something slightly different. Well, that one we've covered too. That was another interesting angle on the staffers who got angry after Gomert came down with COVID-19 and revealed what the conditions are like working for Republicans on the Hill. Some additional interesting perspective on it, but I think we'll let that one lie. Here's an interesting piece from the Washington Post over the last week or so. More QAnon worry. This is now becoming a major topic all over the place. And lots of people I see on Twitter, friends, colleagues, etc., saying, worrying over how many people that they know in real life who turn out to be full-on QAnon adherents, which is kind of weird. I don't think I know anybody like that, but you never know. And I don't really want to find out either. But this revealing of a troubling undercurrent in American politics, we've talked about it quite a bit, but we'll spend a few minutes before the break taking a look at the beginning, anyway, of this Post piece. How the Trump campaign came to court QAnon, the online conspiracy movement identified by the FBI as a violent threat. Don't forget that they have, in fact, been responsible for a couple of violent attacks out there, despite the fact that most of them seem to be not harmless loonies, but loonies nonetheless. Isaac Stanley Becker reporting this piece over the weekend. I guess Saturday was the second, right? Outside the Las Vegas Convention Center, Kayleigh McEnany raised a microphone to a mega fan and asked what it felt like to be acknowledged by President Trump at his February rally in Sin City. At the time, a spokeswoman for the Trump re-election campaign, McEnany nodded as the supporter said the shout-out was most meaningful because of the words on the shirt he was wearing, which he read aloud, "Where we go one, we go all." The motto of QAnon conspiracy theorists who believe Trump is battling a cabal of deep state saboteurs who worship Satan and traffic children for sex. Honestly, he does keep saying that. And by the way, I think one of the objections in, not in the Axios interview, but his rally or mini rally at one of his most recent events, apparently he spent a great deal of time insisting that Joe Biden was pro-child sex trafficking. It's getting more and more ridiculous by the minute here. McEnany, who has since become White House press secretary, which is worrisome enough all by itself, continued asking the supporter, if you could say one thing to the president, what would you say? And his stupid answer is, "Who is Q?" he replied, inquiring about the mysterious online figure behind the baseless theory. McEnany smiled and said, "Okay, well, I will pass all of this along." That was maybe her last moment of sanity. The little-noticed exchange, captured in a video posted to YouTube, illustrates how Trump and his campaign have courted and legitimized QAnon adherents. The viral online movement, which took root in internet message boards in the fall of 2017 with posts from a self-proclaimed government insider identified as Q, has triggered violent acts and occasional criminal cases, Its effects were cataloged last year in an FBI intelligence bulletin listing QAnon among the anti-government, identity-based, and fringe political conspiracy theories that very likely motivate some domestic extremists to commit criminal, sometimes violent activity. As the worldview took shape online, its followers flocked to Trump rallies with QAnon apparel and placards. Recently, as the election draws closer, actions by the president and his associates have brought them more directly into the fold. The Trump campaign's director of press communications, for example, went on a QAnon program and urged listeners to sign up and attend Trump Victory Leadership Initiative training. QAnon iconography has appeared on official campaign advertisements targeting battleground states. And the White House's Director of Social Media and Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications, Dan Scavino, has gone from endorsing praise from QAnon accounts to posting their memes himself. They've really grafted themselves onto this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with this rather frightening story about the integration of QAnon weirdos directly into the campaign and White House operations as well. The president has repeatedly elevated its digital foot soldiers, the QAnon foot soldiers, that is, sharing their tweets more than a dozen times from the 4th of July on the 4th of July alone. That's even worse. His middle son, Eric, who is 36 and a campaign surrogate, recently posted and then deleted an image drumming up support for his father's Tulsa rally that included a giant Q and the text, "Where we go one, we go all." They pretty much know what they're doing here, although it is Eric, so I guess there's some excuse for him, I suppose, I guess some plausible deniability. He doesn't understand anything. The apparent convergence of Trump's inner circle with an ever-widening cohort of QAnon believers is alarming to scholars of extremism and digital communications, some of whom characterize the theory's adherents as a cult. What most troubles analysts, however, is not that McEnany and others responsible for carrying out Trump's agenda are amplifying QAnon, which has permeated right-wing politics and inspired a cadre of congressional candidates who could soon bring the philosophy to Capitol Hill. Even more worrisome, these observers say, is that the president's messaging is increasingly indistinguishable from some key elements of the conspiracy theory. The erroneous ideas defining QAnon, that Trump is a messianic figure fighting the so-called deep state, that he alone can be trusted, that his opponents include both Democrats and Republicans complicit in years of wrongdoing, and that his rivals are not just misguided but criminal and illegitimate, represent core tenets of the president's re-election campaign, especially as his poll numbers slump. Meanwhile, the salvation envisioned by QAnon believers, including a military takeover, hooray, and a mass arrest of Democrats, rhymes with the president's vow to use the armed forces to, quote, dominate. They back his endorsement of hydroxychloroquine, an anti-malarial drug that has not been proved to prevent coronavirus infection, and cast skeptics, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's leading expert on infectious diseases, as a deep state plant. We're seeing the Trump campaign tack closely to an almost explicitly QAnon narrative. said Ethan Zuckerman, director of the Center for Civic Media at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I don't expect to hear the president talking about pedophilia or Satanism, but I expect to hear almost everything else. And he did. He didn't use the word pedophilia, but he did come out and say Biden was pro-child sex trafficking. That's about as close as you can get. McEnany did not respond to a request for comment, but White House spokeswoman Sarah Matthews sent a written statement saying, "The premise of your article is ridiculous. While the Trump administration is working tirelessly for the American people, the Washington Post peddles in conspiracy theories." The Trump campaign also did not respond to emailed questions. The oft-mutating QAnon philosophy has captured the imagination of a new core of pro-Trump congressional candidates, about a dozen of whom have already secured spots on the ballot in November, according to a tally by Media Matters for America, a liberal research organization. Among them is Angela Stanton King, a Republican House candidate in Georgia who served 2 years in prison for her role in a car theft ring, but whose sentence was commuted by Trump in February. A month later, she posted a popular QAnon video on Instagram, writing of the president, "This would explain why they tried so hard to make us hate him." She has since posted repeatedly about the scourge of pedophilia, a fixation of the QAnon movement. Yes, she came to our attention the other day. She is also a denialist with respect to the case of Herman Cain, who believes that it was not COVID that killed Herman Cain, but, I guess she thought his underlying, previously put into remission, stage 4 colon cancer. But, I think when he ran for president in 2012, had said that he was like 6 years in remission from the colon cancer. So, but anyway, she went a step further in claiming that all the rich white Democratic celebrities who get COVID recover, but a black Republican who gets it dies. I see conspiracy here. Well, that's where she's coming from. In an interview, she said, "People have a right to look into information and do their own research. Her research has led her to misguided beliefs about the coronavirus, including that the pandemic represents a political game to make it seem like the economy has crashed." Similar language is employed by QAnon believers who scroll their accusations across social media. They rally around the hashtag WWG1WGA, shorthand, of course, for where we go one, we go all, and swarm their perceived enemies. "These people are not only sick, but evil too," one combatant in the Q Army on Facebook wrote in March, referring to the Democratic mayor of Minneapolis, whom Trump has attacked as a very weak radical left mayor. Individuals who had posted in support of QAnon or otherwise expressed their devotion to it, according to police, have been arrested in at least 10 incidents, including 2 murders, a kidnapping, vandalism of a church, and a heavily armed standoff near the Hoover Dam. Twitter recently took action against the conspiracy theory, including by eliminating more than 7,000 accounts. Facebook is also weighing new action, a spokesperson confirmed, speaking on condition of anonymity to discuss ongoing deliberations. The largest Facebook groups devoted to the theory boast hundreds of thousands of members, but the size of the following is difficult to measure, experts say. Only about a quarter of American adults say they have heard of QAnon, according to polling by the Pew Research Center. Americans may be oblivious to QAnon, but still shaped by its doctrine, Zuckerman said, arguing it's actually more dangerous if people don't know what Q is, but hold these beliefs. Because of the overlap between QAnon communities and far-right circles, he said, aspects of the conspiracy theory are filtering up to conservative websites as well as to pro-Trump One America News and Fox News. The coronavirus pandemic, by bringing into sharp focus anti-scientific beliefs among a broad segment of the president's supporters, offer a preview of the clashing worldviews that QAnon could portend, Zuckerman added. The November election, if Trump were to refuse to accept the legitimacy of the results because of widespread mail-in voting, would represent the clash's climax, testing the parallel universe that he and some of his supporters live in, he said. Such an outcome would mark the culmination of Trump's use of conspiracy theories for the past 5 years, said Joseph Usinski, Do I have that right? Usinski? It's good bet. Anyway, a political scientist at the University of Miami and co-author of American Conspiracy Theories. QAnon, however, is a new frontier for Republicans and for the party's most prominent purveyor of conspiracy theories. Recent ads from Trump's re-election campaign have included shots of supporters with QAnon paraphernalia, including a spot in Nevada that briefly showed a woman in a crowd with a Q shirt. A spot in Arizona showed a still of a man in a similar shirt carrying a World War II veteran into an arena. The man posed for a photo with Donald Trump Jr. at a recent event, according to material later uploaded to Facebook. Spokesperson for Trump Jr. did not respond to a request for comment. The inclusion of QAnon symbols in official campaign media, previously unreported, sent shockwaves through the QAnon community, whose primary aim is to be noticed by Trump. The ads racked up thousands of comments on YouTube, where users with QAnon references in their accounts seized on the fleeting visuals to declare victory. Well done, one wrote. Sometimes the signaling from the campaign is less subtle. Last fall, Erin Perrine, director of press communications for Trump's re-election campaign, went on Patriots Soapbox, a show on YouTube and other platforms devoted to QAnon coverage. Before she called in, one of the hosts, whose Twitter account features QAnon references and a photo with Brad Parscale, Trump's recently deposed campaign manager, gushed about speaking to her for an hour before a recent Trump rally. He said the segment with Perrine, which was unearthed by Media Matters, could be the tip of the iceberg for connections with the Trump campaign. During the interview, Perrine was asked to send a direct message to the group of very, very smart activists here, keen to be Trump's soldiers on the ground. She encouraged them to sign up for a campaign training event and to talk to their local GOP party, their state party. Come online and ask us. Whatever that's supposed to mean. Neither Perrine nor her hosts mentioned QAnon directly during the interview, but their discussion was studded with references to the conspiracy theory, including mention of the insurgency from within and remarks about Michael Flynn, Trump's first national security advisor, who is central to the QAnon worldview. Emails and a call to Perrine went unanswered, as did an email to the show. Flynn, who pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his communications with the Russian diplomat in late 2016, recently recorded a video of himself repeating an oath originating on 8kun, it's 8 like 8chan, but 8kun. I don't think I've ever even heard this one. A message board where Q, who claims high-level security clearance, posts esoteric references and half-baked ideas that followers call breadcrumbs. Where we go one, we go all, intoned Flynn, his right hand raised at the end of the oath, which otherwise follows the generic script administered to new members of Congress. Flynn did not respond to a text message seeking comment. His attorney, Sidney Powell, another luminary for QAnon conspiracy theorists, who has also appeared on Patriots Soapbox, also did not respond to a request for comment. The program's other guests have included Chanel Rayon, the chief White House correspondent for One America News, who said the conspiracy theory's central figure is anonymous for a reason, for a very good reason, and I think that people need to respect that. Rayon did not respond to a request for comment. Praise for the anonymous figure, whose posts have been linked to multiple violent episodes, has also flowed on Fox News. During a conversation this month with Eric Trump, one of the channel's hosts, Jesse Waters, does he say Waters or is it Waters, the way he says it? I don't know. Credited Q with having uncovered a lot of great stuff, saying later in a statement that he does not support or believe in the conspiracy theory. In a pitch to potential guests shared with the Washington Post by someone who received it, Fox characterized the segment this way: Inside Twitter's crackdown on QAnon, how the social media giant is engaging in election interference and shutting down free speech. A Fox spokesperson declined to comment beyond Waters' statement. The congressional candidates who put stock in the theory say its proximity to Trump makes it appealing. Flynn's apparent endorsement, his move to swear his allegiance to QAnon, was decisive for some who had once only flirted with the theory. Oh, he was national security advisor. Yeah, well, he's also pleaded guilty to what amounts to espionage. But screw that. That was all inside baseball and deep state plotting. It's quite amazing. But yeah, that's actually very persuasive to people. He was a general, for God's sake. Anyway, let's see. Teresa Rayborn, a Republican House candidate from Illinois, said she's been on the fence, unable to definitively debunk or definitively confirm. But when General Flynn posted that video, when he spoke Dutch to that little girl, when General Flynn posted that video, he's a highly respected general and has been for decades. And he is very close to President Trump. She said he hasn't been respected for decades. He was kicked out of the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency for violating all of its counterintelligence protocols. He's a fired and disgraced general and has been for a long time. And that's why Trump took him. He was fired by Obama. Anyway, she goes on to say, so I don't think he would do that for a conspiracy theory. At least logically, that's where I'm at. I don't know if he has information about whether it's a conspiracy theory or whether it's real, but it seemed to give a lot of validity to people who supported me, who also happen to follow Q. Interesting. Rayborn, who ran unopposed in her March primary and so will appear on the ballot in November, faces near certain defeat by the heavily Democratic district in the suburbs of Chicago. Flynn's role is just as important to the supporters interviewed by McEnany in February. He described himself as one of the digital soldiers General Flynn talks about. That's why I don't sleep, he told the soon-to-be White House press secretary. That's why all I do is share information. And isn't it great? It's just information, man. It wants to be free. Very scary. And they know very well what they're activating here. And they're glad to do it. They're happy to do it. And, what can I do? You gotta vote. And you gotta get rid of this guy. It's unbelievable. All right, let's see. I put aside a empty wheel tweet at some point. What were we looking at here? Oh, yes, another of the stories we haven't really, I guess that we neglected yesterday, and I guess we'll put it on record here, even though I need some clarification on it. Maybe this will be provided. But the Washington Post story from Thursday. And then, of course, we didn't do a live show on Friday, so we didn't get to bring that up either. DHS compiling intelligence reports on journalists who published leaked documents. Now, I understand that the person deemed to be responsible for compiling these intelligence reports has been, temporarily anyway, has been fired from their job at DHS, and I don't recall exactly what happened to them, whether they're just out of DHS entirely or transferred, or they're just going to join the Trump campaign. I'm not really sure what happened, but this was a contentious point, but it only lasted for a couple of hours as they did damage control and booted somebody from a job somewhere. Whether or not he or she was really responsible for this leak, ultimately, it remains to be seen. But just to catch up with the fact that this happened, Shane Harris reporting for the Washington Post, the Department of Homeland Security has compiled intelligence reports about the work of American journalists covering protests in Portland, Oregon, in what current and former officials called an alarming use of a government system meant to share information about suspected terrorists and violent actors. Once again, the clear progeny of the overbroad Patriot Act and the authorizing legislation for the Department of Homeland Security. Kind of predictable. Certainly predicted, which really by definition makes it predictable. But there you have it, by a lot of people. All the dumb hippies who get everything wrong all the time until they're proven right. Over the past week, the department's Office of Intelligence and Analysis has disseminated 3 open source intelligence reports to federal law enforcement agencies and others, summarizing tweets by 2 journalists, a reporter for the New York Times and the editor-in-chief of the blog Lawfare, and noting they had published leaked, unclassified documents about DHS operations in Portland. The intelligence reports obtained by the Washington Post include written descriptions and images of the tweets and the number of times they had been liked or retweeted by others. After the Post published a story online Thursday evening detailing the department's practices, the acting Homeland Security Secretary, who is not the acting Homeland Secretary, Chad Wolf, ordered the intelligence office to stop collecting information on journalists and announced an investigation into the matter, which he's not entitled to do. But okay. Upon learning about the practice, fake acting Secretary Wolf directed the DHS Intelligence and Analysis Directorate to immediately discontinue collecting information involving members of the press, a department spokesman said in a statement. But of course, since he's not the acting secretary, they didn't listen to him. Wouldn't that be an interesting twist? In no way does the acting secretary, who isn't an acting secretary, condone this practice, and he has immediately ordered an inquiry into the matter. The not acting secretary is committed to ensuring that all DHS personnel uphold the principle of professionalism, impartiality, and respect for civil rights and civil liberties, particularly as it relates to the exercise of First Amendment rights. Some of the leaked DHS documents the journalists posted and wrote about revealed shortcomings in the department's understanding of the nature of the protests in Portland, as well as techniques that intelligence analysts have used. A memo by the department's top intelligence official, which was tweeted by the editor of Lawfare, says personnel relied on FinTel, F-I-N-T-E-L, an acronym for financial intelligence, as well as finished intelligence baseball cards of arrested protesters to try to understand their motivations and plans. Historically, military and intelligence officials have used such cards for biographical dossiers of suspected terrorists, including those targeted in lethal drone strikes. The DHS intelligence reports, which are unclassified, are traditionally used for sharing the department's analysis with federal law enforcement officials, state and local officials, and some foreign governments. They're not intended to disseminate information about American citizens who have no connection to terrorists or other violent actors and who are engaged in activity protected by the First Amendment, current and former officials said. Yes. This has no operational value whatsoever, said John Sandweg, who previously served as the department's acting general counsel. Maybe, but maybe not. This will just damage the intelligence office's reputation, Sandweg said, calling the decision to report on journalists incredibly dumb. Officials who are familiar with the reports and who spoke on condition of anonymity to candidly discuss them said they are consistent with the department's aggressive tactics in Portland, and in particular the work of the Intelligence and Analysis Office, which they worry is exceeding the boundaries of its authority in an effort to crack down on Antifa protesters to please President Trump. He and other senior administration officials have used that anti-fascist label to describe people in Portland and other cities who are protesting police violence, as well as others who have vandalized statues and memorials to Confederate officers that they consider racist. The reports reflect the intelligence officers' concerns about leaks of internal information. To broadly disseminate an intelligence report, including to numerous state and local law enforcement agencies, about a DHS leak to a reporter strikes me as bizarre, said Steve Bunnell, maybe Bunnell, who knows, but who served as the department's general counsel for 3 years in the Obama administration. If department officials were concerned about unauthorized disclosures, they should refer the matter to the Inspector General or handle it internally, he said. Disseminating the information about internal leaks of this nature via the intelligence reports has nothing to do with DHS's original mission, Bunnell said. The Intelligence and Analysis Office, that's a difficult term, isn't it? Has for years been the butt of jokes among larger, more established agencies like CIA and FBI, who liken it to a team of junior varsity athletes. The DHS office produces reports that are largely based on unclassified, often public sources of information that current and former officials have said are of limited use. During operations in Portland, the office had sought to expand its reach. Earlier this month, DHS personnel were authorized, maybe not, to collect information on protesters who threaten to damage or destroy public memorials and statues, regardless of whether they are on federal property, a significant expansion of authorities that have historically been used to protect landmarks from terrorist attacks, former officials said. The intelligence reports about the journalists say they are provided for intelligence and lead purposes and have been deemed necessary for the intended recipient to understand, assess, or act on the information provided. One of the journalists, Times reporter Mike Baker, co-wrote an article on July 28th that revealed an internal DHS memo indicating that the camouflaged federal agents sent to put down the unrest in Portland didn't understand the nature of the protests they were facing. The DHS memo described the conflict as connected to a years-long history of violence against government personnel and facilities in the Pacific Northwest by anarchist extremists. But it acknowledged that we have low confidence in our assessment when it comes to understanding the current protests in Oregon's largest city. We lack insight into the motives and for the most recent attacks, the memo said. Baker included an image of that portion in the memo in a Twitter thread that also linked to the Times article. The DHS intelligence report included that tweet and stated that Baker had opposed a leaked Department of Homeland Security internal product. A spokeswoman for the Times declined to comment. The other journalist, Benjamin Wittes, yes, we've called his name a couple times, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution and the editor-in-chief of Lawfare, has also posted various internal documents to his Twitter feed, including, on July 24th, a memo admonishing department personnel not to give information to reporters. The ongoing leaks related to our work in Portland remain of great concern as it distracts from our mission and creates opportunities for others to exploit this information for their own benefit, the unsigned memo states. The memo was written in response to reporting in Lawfare and the Washington Post days earlier about the new guidance to collect information on people who threatened memorials and statues. The memo defended the intelligence office's authority and said its work had informed our analysis on the enduring threat environment in Portland and disrupted attempted violent attacks. Wittes told the Post that he didn't object to the department expressing concerns about leaks, and that if officials had sent a link to his tweet in a message to employees, he wouldn't object. It's not the sharing of my tweet that's disturbing, it's the construction of an intelligence report on a U.S. person that's disturbing, Wittes said. If the department was willing to document public statements this way, what would stop DHS from making a public record dossier on me? Wittes asked. I'm considering my legal options, and I will have more to say about this at a later date, he added. In a subsequent tweet that was also the subject of an intelligence report, Wittes posted an internal memo from Brian Murphy, the DHS acting undersecretary for intelligence and analysis and a former FBI agent, announcing that officials were changing the terminology used for individuals attacking federal facilities. The decision, Murphy wrote, was based in part on the open source intelligence reports that officials had reviewed about protesters. We can't say any longer that this violent situation is opportunistic, Murphy wrote, adding that intelligence overwhelmingly led officials to believe that the attackers were driven by anarchist and violent Antifa ideologies. Murphy's conclusions cut against the earlier DHS memo, which the Times reported, and said the department didn't have enough information to know whether the Portland protesters were connected to anti-government groups that had a history of operating in the region. It's an interesting development, and like I said, some heads have rolled at DHS, but it's not clear to me or anybody else whether that necessarily really means the practice has ended. I picked this up in finding an empty wheel tweet from last Friday morning about it, and she was, as she puts things in her tweets, a little rough in language. Washington Post reports that DHS was sharing info on Benjamin Wittes and New York Times Mike Baker because they wrote on internal unclassified docs showing that DHS knew F all about what they were doing in Portland. That's a nice summation of what we actually learned in that piece, and we'll get up to date, I'm sure, on what has happened since. Hopefully I can grab something and just share that briefly tomorrow. It's time now for us to start thinking about handing the reins over to Justice Putnam for his West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, bringing you up to speed on yet more items across the spectrum of news that we have not yet been able to share with you. But let's see, I think we did a better job in diving into a few of the subjects that we've had to leave along the way, but definitely a few more. still looming out there, including more war dogs for PPE comparisons that I think I can share with you in the next couple of days, and a few other spare items that just seem like they've definitely been of some interest and sitting and waiting for an open spot. But Trump, he continues to make more distractions and successfully distract us from handling the news by saying things more and more outrageous. Probably something else has been said during the course of the show, and I suppose it's an option for Justice to pick up on those things afterwards. But I think the playbook is pretty much set, and he's sharing it with me already. I'll share it with you before our music runs out. Let's see what we've got today. Starting off in the Bistro Cafe. You know how he structures this thing. Trump isn't sure of the character of John Lewis, another of the awful snippets from the Axios interview. The character of John Lewis, or how history will remember him, and Trump doesn't really care anyway, since Lewis snubbed his inauguration. Another obsessive 5-minute speech like the thing about the ramp at West Point and how he knows how to drink water. Incredible. Then on the rest of the menu, the House Oversight Committee invited the new Postmaster General to appear at a hearing next month instead of ordering him to do so now, which would be smarter, I think. The House Intelligence Committee launched an investigation into the Department of Homeland Security's intelligence office over its actions in Portland, Oregon. Good, an update. Fantastic. He'll provide it. I didn't get to it. And other protests across the country, of course, all wrapped up in that news.
From
next.
Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, moving across the churning waters here, a federal judge has ruled it's discriminatory to deny Puerto Rico U.S. aid. And moving on to the chef's table, a new survey in Italy found that coronavirus is 6 times more prevalent than the official data, and classified U.S.-UK trade documents leaked ahead of Britain's 2019 election stolen